I do see we have one person in the waiting room, so I'm going to wait just a few more minutes before, well, not minutes, a few more moments before we get started. All right, it looks to me like everyone is here. It is 1:03. Let's go ahead and go back on the record. Where we left off, we had completed Dr. Miltenberger's rebuttal testimony. And I think at this point, as I understand, Mr. Bivens is prepared to call KWBA's next witness, which I believe is Dr. Davids.
That's correct. I do have, I guess, one minor point I'd like to raise on scheduling and logistics now, Ms. Kenzie, if I may.
Please.
So I'm hoping we can get, if not an agreement, at least some guidance on the timing for finishing this hearing within the time allotted. We just got through Dr. Miltenberger. That took about 2.5 hours. We've got 2 more witnesses, and I don't begrudge anyone's right to conduct a thorough cross-examination of our witnesses, but I do also have a thorough cross-examination of my own for Buena Vista's witnesses. I'm hoping we can agree that we'll get through Kern Water Bank's witnesses today and reserve tomorrow for Buena Vista, so that the time is roughly equal.
I'm not going to ask the parties for an agreement. That is certainly my goal for the day. What I'd like to do is go ahead and proceed forward. We do have that, which is on my own account, a half-hour break from 3:30 to 4. But let's go ahead and proceed forward. That was my intent as to how to fit us all in, and we'll see how we do. Does that work for you, Mr. Bivens?
That would work very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, are you prepared? I see we have Dr. Davids here. Are you, is there anything else, Mr. Bivens, before I swear in Dr. Davids?
There is not, and we will call Dr. Davids as our next witness.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Dr. Davids. It's good to see you again.
Good afternoon, Ms. Kenzie. It's nice to see you as well.
Will you please raise your right hand? Dr. Davids, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may proceed, Mr. Bivens.
All right, and Ms. Mullen, if we could please pull up Exhibit KWBA 179. And Dr. Davids, is Exhibit KWBA 160 true and correct copy of your written rebuttal testimony?
It is.
And exhibit...
We get his full name on the record.
Yes, I would be glad to do that. So my full name is Jeffrey C. Davids. It's Jeffrey. Davids. It's like David with an S on the end.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Bivens.
That's all right. Dr. Davids, Exhibit KWBA 179 is a true and correct copy of your PowerPoint summary that you submitted with your written testimony, correct?
That is correct.
Would you please summarize your written testimony for the hearing officer?
I'd be happy to do so. Next slide, please, Ms. Mullen. Okay, I will be covering 4 of the 5 topics listed here, and that's the first, skipping the second, and then the third through the 5th. Next slide, please, Ms. Mullen. In Dr. Howe's rebuttal testimony, he asserts that my assumption about the proportional relationship between alfalfa yield and ET are wrong. I disagree. As I stated in my original testimony, the relationship between crop yield, especially for forage crops like alfalfa, and evapotranspiration is well established and linear in nature. An excellent paper that supports this understanding was published in Agricultural Water Management in 2009 with a list of notable and reputable authors, including Chris Perry, Pasquale Steduto, Richard Allen, and Charles Burt, who's one of Dr. Howe's colleagues at the Cal Poly ITRC. I'd like to read an excerpt from this article. The water consumed by transpiration is in exchange for the assimilation of carbon dioxide through plant stomata, leading to the production of biomass. Now, this is, in my mind, one of the great wonders of the natural world is what the authors are speaking about. And it's the process of taking carbon from our atmosphere and actually making biomass for the primary production that supports the rest of the ecosystem. And so what I've done here on the right is made a visual representation of what the authors are speaking about, just so that we have a common understanding of this. The white dashed line represents a theoretical interface between the plant on the left and the atmosphere on the right. And in the middle of this interface, I've put a door. And this door represents what's called the stomata, or singular stoma, which in Greek means mouth. And this door is the passageway through which both carbon from the atmosphere can enter into the plant, but at the same time through which water from the plant actually exits to the atmosphere. And it's this fundamental reality that these two processes, both the assimilation of carbon from the atmosphere into the plant and the transpiration of water from the plant into the atmosphere, the fundamental reality that these share the same physical mechanism through which they travel is the reality that pins these two functions together: the assimilation of carbon for biomass production, and again, the transpiration of water during that process. Next slide, please, Ms. Mullen. Now, in the case of forage crops like alfalfa, the majority of what is produced by the plant, the above ground biomass, is actually harvested. So not only can we say that there is a linkage between biomass and the consumptive use of that crop, we can actually say there's a linkage between the harvestable yield, again, in the case of alfalfa and other forage crops, and the crop water consumption. And this is exactly what the authors of the 7th chapter of a seminal paper from the University of, it's a seminal book from the University of California at Davis that was published in 2008 and 2009, titled Irrigated Alfalfa Management. And chapter 7 specifically relates to the irrigation of alfalfa in arid regions. And I'll read this quote from them. "Seasonal alfalfa yield is directly related to seasonal ET. Alfalfa yield increases as ET increases, with maximum yield occurring at maximum seasonal ET." And parenthetically, they reference figure 7.2, and I've included that on the right side of this slide as well. And what we can see here is that as the authors state, crop evapotranspiration, which is on the horizontal axis, is proportional to alfalfa yield on the vertical axis. And there's this green straight line that represents this linear connection between these two processes. Again, linking this back to the previous slide, the reason why this is the case is because biomass, which is yield, and crop evapotranspiration are linked through the stoma. That's the physical linkage. Next slide, please. In fact, I think at this point, Ms. Mullen, if we could, I need to skip through slides 5, 6, 7, and 8. I think we need to end up on slide 9 here. Great, thank you so much. So the next topic of my rebuttal testimony is with regards to Buena Vista's water accounting approach. Now, Dr. Howes criticized KWBA's experts for not clearly defining the spatial and temporal domains in his rebuttal testimony. However, in contrast to Dr. Howes' rebuttal testimony, my case-in-chief analysis clearly had fixed and rigid temporal and spatial domains. With regards to the temporal domain, I analyzed precisely the time period from 1885 through 2019, and I did that on a monthly time step. Now, at times I aggregated the data to an annual time step for the purposes of reporting or visualization, but this was consistently implemented. With regards to the spatial domain, I analyzed precisely the same 50,472 acres that are within the current Buena Vista Water Storage District service area for the entire period of my analysis. Now, Dr. Howes does not attempt to quantify crop water requirements circa 1914, except for his so-called corrections of my case-in-chief analysis. Instead, he credits all flows past second point to absorption to beneficial use, except for two flow paths. And the first is the flood channel north of Wasco Road, and the second is the Kern River intertie. Now, together, this leads me to conclude that Dr. Howe's analysis, including his zone of influence and the associated absorption to beneficial use, is amorphous and ever expanding in nature. And further, his zone of influence methodology is an improper method for quantifying the beneficial use of water. Next slide, please. Now, Ms. Kinsey, you posed a question in your status of the notice of status conference about the applicability of my methodology from my case in chief analysis to the lands north of Wasco Road. And Dr. Miltenberger has extensively written about this in his sur rebuttal testimony, and also this morning expanded upon that. But I'd just like to highlight 5 things from Dr. Miltenberger's testimony and relate that directly to my case in chief analysis, so that it's clear, the differences that we're stating here. So the cropping patterns, I specifically relied on 3 sources for cropping patterns in my case in chief analysis for the lands within the Buena Vista Water Storage District service area. And those were historical reports of cropped acreages and cropped varieties, the District Securities Commission reports that the district filed themselves, and also the Department of Water Resources crop surveys starting in the 1970s. As Dr. Miltenberger has already testified, the cropping patterns for the lands north of Wasco Road were primarily characterized by wild feed and predominantly rain-fed grazing lands to the north of Wasco Road. And an extensive research would have to be completed to verify the extent and the cropping patterns for the lands north of Wasco Road. Next, with regards to crop water requirements, my case in chief analysis assumed that all crop water requirements were met, so there was no stress for the crops. However, in contrast to this, as Dr. Miltenberger has already testified, there were persistent water scarcity issues for the lands north of Wasco Road. So this simply wouldn't have been the case in that area. Further, with regards to water sources, my case in chief analysis assumed that all water that the crops required was met by Kern River surface water. And in contrast to this, Dr. Miltenberger has testified that there were other water sources available to the lands north of Wasco Road, including possibly groundwater. With regards to soils, my case in chief testimony assumed that soils were not a limiting factor for the production of biomass, essentially the production of crop within the current Buena Vista Water Storage District. In contrast to this, Dr. Miltenberger's testimony has already highlighted the alkalinity issues with the soils north of Wasco Road. And certainly these issues could pose a limiting factor or a binding constraint on the development of these lands and the productivity in terms of crop water production. And further, with regards to irrigation and drainage infrastructure, my case in chief analysis assumed that there was sufficient infrastructure to get this water to the crops when and where they needed it. And as Dr. Miltenberger has already testified, this was likely not the case for the lands north of Wasco Road, which had not as well developed infrastructure as the Button Willow and Maples Ranch service areas of the Buena Vista Water Storage District. Finally, Miller and Lux agreed that there were substantial differences culminating in their decision to exclude these lands from the current Buena Vista Water Storage District service area. Next slide, please. So I've already highlighted a few reasons why my case in chief analysis was conservatively high. But the one that I'd like to highlight on this slide is my estimate of irrigation efficiency. So my estimate of irrigation efficiency was very conservative for my case in chief analysis. And namely, it was 50% in 1885 and 54% circa 1914. Now, Dr. Howes agrees with the conservatively low nature of my case in chief irrigation efficiency estimates. And in his rebuttal testimony, he states, I do not agree that the efficiencies were this low in 1885, referring back to my 50%. Now, what I want to make really clear at this point is that any increases in irrigation efficiency would only lead to reduce the need for applied water. So these two parameters are sort of inversely related. If you increase irrigation efficiency from say 50% to 75%, you actually decrease applied water requirements by a factor of 1/3. So it's not even a linear scaling. And this is a very important point here. Next slide, please, Ms. Mon. Okay, so the point of this slide is that my upper range estimates of applied water circa 1914 are already conservatively higher than reported water duties. And as Dr. Miltenberger has already testified, Bulletin 9 provides water duties for different crops, specifically alfalfa of 3.0 acre feet per acre, corn of 1.5 acre feet per acre, and grain of 1.0 acre feet per acre. Now, what I'd like to do as I finish my summary of my SIR rebuttal testimony is compare these estimates from people that did on the ground work in Buena Vista in the teens as they culminated towards their preparation of Bulletin 9. I'd like to compare these applied water duties that they reference in Bulletin 9 against my case in chief analysis, and then finally against Dr. Howe's corrections of my case in chief analysis. My case in chief analysis estimated an applied water duty of 3.53 acre feet per acre on average. That's across all 50,472 acres. Some of those acres were fallowed, for example. So this is an average of all of that. And this is 18% higher already than assuming wall-to-wall alfalfa cultivation. This is already 18% higher. Further, if you look at my case in chief analysis and you look specifically at the lands cultivating alfalfa, in that case, the applied water duty was 4.36. This is 45% higher than Bulletin 9's alfalfa, estimated alfalfa duty of 3.0 acre feet per acre. Now, finally, in Dr. Howe's corrections, he states that the average applied water duty is 4.91 acre feet per acre. And this is an incredibly 64% higher than Bulletin 9's estimate, even assuming wall-to-wall cultivation of alfalfa. And in my professional opinion, this case in chief analysis, or Dr. Howe's corrections of my case in chief analysis are simply not credible for this reason. And that concludes my summary of my SIR rebuttal.
Thank you, Dr. Davids.
Thank you.
At this point, I will look to you, Mr. Becerra. Do you have cross-examination questions for Dr. Davids?
I do.
All right, let's go ahead and you may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Dr. David's testimony, exhibit KWVA 160, and go to page 22. Dr. Davids, in paragraphs 37 through 39, you explain why you think your case in chief methodology doesn't apply north of Wasco Road. Is that right?
That's correct. I just wanted to verify that it stops at 39. That's correct, Mr. Becerra.
Are you aware Miller and Lux owned more than 50,000 acres north of Wasco Road circa 1914?
I am aware of that, yes.
Are you aware Miller and Lux was using those lands for grazing circa 1914?
I'm not aware of the extent of the grazing, but I am aware that the lands were characterized as producing wild feed or grazing. That's correct.
And are you aware they were characterized as doing that in seasons of abundant water supply?
I think that would make sense. I don't recall the specific documentation of where it said seasons of abundant water supply. So that specific language, I couldn't tell you where that language would come from, but I think that makes practical sense.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 23 of Exhibit KWBA 160? And scroll down to lines 17 through 20. On those lines, Dr. Davids, are you saying that you believe Miller and Lux did not use Kern River water north of Wasco Road circa 1914?
I'd like to have a moment to read in context the paragraph that you're speaking about. And just to be clear, you're speaking about lines 16 through 20. Is that correct, Mr. Brazera?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, give me one moment and I'll just review that. So I've reviewed the text. Would you mind repeating your question, please?
Sure. On lines 16 through 20, are you saying that you believe Miller and Lux did not use Kern River water north of Wasco Road circa 1914?
Yeah, that's definitely not what this paragraph is saying.
Is it your opinion Miller and Lux was using Kern River water north of Wasco Road circa 1914?
Well, that's certainly not an opinion that I've stated here in my SIR rebuttal testimony.
You have presented no estimate of Miller and Lux's water use north of Wasco Road circa 1914 in this hearing, correct?
Yeah, and well, I think as stated in my summary just moments ago, the spatial domain of my case in chief analysis was the 50,472 acres of the current Buena Vista Water Storage District service area.
So, Dr. Davids, you have presented no testimony in this hearing to estimate Miller and Lux's water use north of Wasco Road circa 1914, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. I'm changing subjects. Ms. Mullen, could we please go to page 19 of Exhibit KWBA 160? And Dr. Davids, in paragraphs 31 through 36, you state how you disagree with Dr. House's critique of the boundaries you used in your case in chief analysis. Is that right?
So yeah, the paragraphs are 31 through 36. Could you expand on what you mean by boundaries for me to answer that question?
Dr. House critiqued the spatial and temporal boundaries you used in your case in chief analysis, correct?
That's correct.
And in these paragraphs, you state why you disagree with that critique. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Your case in chief testimony was to provide a theoretical estimate of diversions to irrigate areas within Buena Vista circa 1914. Is that right?
Could you define what you mean by within Buena Vista?
Certainly. Well, within the boundaries, current boundaries of Buena Vista Water Storage District?
Yes, that's correct.
one element of Dr. House's critique of your testimony was that you did not include any accumulation of water into Buena Vista Lake storage. Is that accurate?
Could you repeat the question again, Mr. Becerra?
Sure. One element of Dr. House's critique of your analysis was that you did not include accumulation of water in Buena Vista Lake Reservoir storage, correct?
That was one element of Dr. Howe's rebuttal testimony, yes.
And in your case in chief testimony, you in fact did not include accumulation of water into that reservoir storage. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I recall we spent a good amount of time discussing this in the case in chief portion of this hearing, where I specifically highlighted that my analysis, as it states, was an analysis of the irrigation water demand, so the diversion for the purposes of irrigation.
And I'm going to move to strike as non-responsive to try to cut through this quickly.
I'm not going to strike it, Mr. Becerra. I think you can ask follow-up questions though to get more clarity, please.
Dr. Davids, in your case in chief analysis, you did not include any accumulation of water into Buena Vista Lake Reservoir storage, correct?
The assumption in my case in chief analysis was zero change in storage.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 112? Dr. Davids, this is one of your exhibits, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
It's an assembly of aerial photos from 1946. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's a mosaic of aerial photos. Correct.
And it shows Buena Vista Lake Reservoir full of water in 1946. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I can't say confidently that it's precisely full, but there does appear to be water in the lake at the time of the photograph.
It's full to the extent of its lateral boundaries. Is that right?
It appears to be close to that. If not, yes, that's correct.
And in the upper left-hand corner of the photo, you can see part of Buena Vista's service area. Is that right?
So hang on, I'm just going to interpose an objection here that this is a line of questioning is unduly consuming time. We did a cross-examination on Dr. David's case in chief testimony, and it was extensive, and I'm not sure why we're going through it again.
Mr. Becerra, would you like to, well, will you please clarify where we're going with this?
Yes, this goes to the temporal boundaries that Dr. Davids used and his disagreement with Dr. House's critique of those temporal boundaries, specifically water stored in the lake.
All right, I'll allow you to continue, Mr. Becerra.
Dr. Davids, between the green dashed lines, that shows part of Buena Vista's Buttonwillow service area. Is that right?
That's correct. The green dash lines up on the upper left of the figure. That's correct.
And between the lines, it shows agricultural cultivation. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
And outside of those lines, or just to the east and just to the west, it shows no agricultural cultivation. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say that confidently at this scale, but certainly to the southwest, just understand the topography out there. There's no cultivation. I'm not sure about to the north. to the northeast. I do see some, what looks to be perhaps smaller fields and that sort of thing by the west side intake, for example.
Do you know whether stored water was used to support agricultural cultivation within Buena Vista in 1946?
I don't have specific knowledge of 1946 with regards to stored water, no.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Dr. David's testimony, exhibit KWBA 160? And can we please go to PDF page 21 and paragraph 35? In this paragraph, you critique Dr. House's inclusion of areas that receive transfers and exchanges from Buena Vista in his analysis. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate.
Is it your opinion that a holder of an appropriative water right cannot expand its place of use in a given year to make a transfer?
That sounds like a legal opinion and one that I would not like to venture into.
Are you critiquing Dr. House for including transfers in his analysis of Buena Vista's appropriations?
I think the intent of this critique is that if we're trying to characterize the beneficial use of water, we have to actually understand the ultimate fate of where the water goes. And that's my point is that, where does the water go and ultimately end up being used for these exchanges and transfers? And can we just blindly assume that every drop of water involved in that transfer and exchange is absorbed for beneficial use, which is what the current methodology does? And I think the answer to that is no, we should not.
Have you reviewed any of the contracts under which Buena Vista transfers or exchanges water?
I have not.
When you say the ultimate fate of these waters, and Ms. Mullen, I think we're on page 21, but can we please go to page 21 just to make sure I'm sorry, it's right there. I lost my track. When you say the ultimate fate of these waters on lines 11 and 12, what do you mean?
Well, I can try to give it like sort of a, I don't know, it's not really a practical example, but let's say that the exchange of water, the party to whom the water was exchanged, let's say, was, ultimately the water was, I'm trying to think of an example. The purpose of that diversion was to contaminate it with nuclear waste, let's say, or something like that. Can we blindly just accept that regardless of where that water goes, regardless of how it's used, that it's actually absorbed to beneficial use? I think the point is again, we have to understand the spatial domain of where that water goes and how the inflows and outflows work. What's the ultimate destination or fate of these waters? I mean, those are the questions that we have to put a finer point on to understand beneficial use, not just blindly every drop of water that goes towards a transfer or an exchange.
Is your opinion that Buena Vista cannot take credit for a diversion of water if that water at some point migrates out of the area to which it's delivered?
I think that sounds like a legal opinion that I would not like to venture towards.
If Buena Vista delivers water to a groundwater bank and some of it migrates out of the bank's boundaries, do you think Buena Vista cannot claim credit for the amount of migration?
Objection. Ms. State's testimony calls for a legal conclusion.
I don't think it misstates testimony, because I don't think you've included any testimony, Mr. Becerra. But I'll give the caveat, Dr. Davids, you can answer, but within your acknowledging that you do not have legal expertise, you may answer.
Can
Would
you
you like
ask?
me to repeat the question?
Thank you. You read my mind. Yes, yes, please. Thank you.
Is your technical opinion that if Buena Vista delivers water to a groundwater bank and some of it migrates out of the bank's boundaries, Buena Vista cannot claim credit for that amount of migration?
Well, I think to be able to answer that question, I need to understand what you mean by claim credit. So, because the language that Dr. House is using is absorption to beneficial use. And now that's a phrase that I'm not familiar with or ever heard, prior to the proceedings in this matter. And so I need to understand if by claiming credit, you're speaking about absorption to beneficial use, which hints towards beneficial use, or what credit are we speaking about?
Okay, try it again. If Buena Vista delivers water to a groundwater bank for its eventual use, and some of it migrates out of the bank, can Buena Vista not claim the amount of migration as a diversion under its water right?
Calls for a legal conclusion.
I think that's fair. I'm going to sustain the objection there. So, Mr. Becerra, I think I do think we understand the point, and I also, that does seem like territory we've covered before. So I'll give you another shot if you would like to continue down this way or move on. It's up to you.
So for purpose, Buena Vista delivers water to groundwater banks. Do you understand that?
I do.
Is it your opinion that just the delivery to the water bank is not sufficient to support that water being counted as a diversion by Buena Vista?
Same objection.
I'm trying to understand his ultimate fate of waters and how that relates to his critique here.
Right, and I'm trying. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Becerra. And I think I understand the point of your question. Although the framework here is he's critiquing Dr. Howe's methodology and Dr. Howe's conclusions. So the trick would be, of course, to frame the question with respect to Dr. Howe's conclusions, which I don't have in front of me, and whether or not I just don't know whether his conclusions had to do with credit. I think claiming credit or some similar term for the water rate, but maybe you have that in front of you, Mr. Becerra.
I'll give it
That
a
would be the
try.
key.
Dr. Davids, is it your understanding Dr. Howe's accounted for deliveries to water banks based on the diversion in a given year?
I think we're gonna have to ask the question again, Mr. Becerra. Sorry.
Is it your understanding that Dr. Howe's accounted for diversions by Buena Vista as including diversions to groundwater banks in that particular year?
Well, I think I think the reason I'm hesitating here is because I think the matter at question is the language of absorption to beneficial use, regardless of an understanding of the ultimate fate of these waters. I think that's the crux of the matter. Now, whether it was counted as a diversion in Dr. Howe's analysis, I believe that he counts that as absorption to beneficial use.
Is it your opinion you would have to subtract from that absorption number any water that migrated out of a groundwater bank to which Buena Vista delivered water?
I think my opinion here that I'm trying to state is that in order to do a water accounting analysis, you have to understand the nature of inflows and outflows and you know the different movements of water, which simply the outflow, you know, portion of the analysis was just not explicitly not included in the analysis that Dr. House performed.
Is it your opinion to do an analysis of water absorbed under a water right, you have to also subtract outflows out of the appropriator's area of control?
I don't think that's the opinion that I'm stating here.
Let me, Mr. Becerra, if I can step
Yes.
in, I get to ask open-ended questions. So I'm going to ask an open-ended question of Dr. Davids. Dr. Davids, maybe you can clarify for me, in your opinion, how do you think water that is delivered to a groundwater basin and then for use and then ultimately migrates out of the basin or out of the sub-basin or out of the boundaries of the area where it was delivered for use, how do you think that should be accounted for in an appropriate accounting?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think the answer would lie with the, you know, what is the nature of the accounting that you're trying to do? And what I mean by that, Ms. Kinsey, is if the point of your accounting is basically for you to understand subsequently what you might be able to extract without causing harm to the subbasin, you know, why then I think of course you need to understand, you know, the nature of water perhaps moving into a stream and then moving out of the subbasin, because if you put in 100 and 50 of that, you know, immediately flows into a creek and flows out of that subbasin, you know, you wouldn't want to pull out the 100 again because you would cause, you know, sort of an impact to the basin, right? So this is the type of water accounting that has to happen to understand, you know, you put in this much, but you might only be able to take out so much. And that type of accounting always has to understand, you know, both inflows and outflows to be able to do that sufficiently. Does that help answer your question, Ms. Kinsey?
Yes, I think so. And let me ask a follow-up. And, you know, an appropriate answer might be, you think I'm asking you a legal opinion and you don't have an opinion, but do you have an opinion as to whether the water that would be delivered to this groundwater basin and then ultimately migrates away should be accounted for as beneficially used?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay. That's the end of my follow-up. Maybe Mr. Becerra, I will turn things back to you.
Dr. Davids, do you know whether the Kern Water Bank's accounting for its stored water is consistent with the approach you just described?
Objection, relevance.
The relevance is whether these accounting mechanisms apply across all the parties, or Dr. Davids is just applying them to Buena Vista.
The Kern Water Bank Authority's accounting is not an issue in this phase of the hearing.
Mr. Becerra, I'm going to uphold the objection based on, I think we're talking about critiques of Dr. Howe's methodology, which is the topic of Dr. David's rebuttal. So unless you have a more explicit connection here to the accounting by the Kern Water Bank.
I'd like to understand if he views that kind of accounting as appropriate.
I'm going to sustain the objection and ask you to move on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Mon, can we please go to stay in this exhibit KWBA 160, and go to the bottom of page 3. And Dr. Davids, you see the heading there above paragraph 2?
I do, yes.
And in paragraphs 2 through 10, do you describe why you think alfalfa crop yields relate directly to crop evapotranspiration?
That's correct.
And I'm going to use the term crop ET
Okay.
to refer to crop evapotranspiration. Do you understand that?
Yes, that's perfect.
When you say directly related, do you mean that alfalfa crop yields always rise as crop ET rises?
Well, what I want to clarify is are you intending to ask, is there a causal relationship or just that they co-vary together, those two parameters?
I want to understand what you mean by directly related.
Well, I think the authors of this the irrigated alfalfa management from UC Davis, nicely summarize this point in that, in the figure 7.2 that we saw during the summary of my testimony, where there's this linear relationship between those two parameters. So that's what I mean by that they're related.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 163? And Dr. Davids, is this the UC Davis publication to which you're just referring?
That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 2? And the bottom of the right-hand column, please. And Dr. Davids, the statement seasonal alfalfa yield is directly related to seasonal ET. That's what you're just referencing, correct?
Exactly. Yes, that's correct.
And you rely on the associated figure 7.2 just to the left. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that figure is labeled seasonal evapotranspiration, correct?
Yeah, it does say seasonal alfalfa yield is directly related to seasonal ET. That's correct.
What does the term seasonal mean in this context? Does that mean each growing season?
Well, looking at the caption for figure 7.2, we can see it says the effect of seasonal evapotranspiration on alfalfa yield, and it goes up to 40 inches. And basically, if I understand your question right, you're trying to say, like winter, spring, summer, fall.
No, that's not actually my question.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay,
This
maybe you can clarify your question then.
seasonal yield here refers to an alfalfa growing season, correct?
That's correct. So it's from when the crop comes out of dormancy, in the late winter or spring, and then to where it returns back to dormancy in the fall.
So seasonal here does not mean across multiple growing seasons. Is that accurate?
No, I mean, basically what this means, it's almost analogous to a calendar year, if you will, because alfalfa will start, growing and producing yield, in the spring months as the temperatures rise, and then it'll stop as it goes into fall dormancy. So it's really representative of this entire annual cycle.
So seasonal yield here refers to the yield of alfalfa within a single calendar year. Is that accurate?
I think that would be an accurate assessment. That's correct.
Seasonal yield in relation to figure 7.2 does not refer to across multiple calendar years. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, I think this is meant to be like a prototypical relationship. And what I mean by that is that this relationship, right, again, based on the physical interaction of carbon through the stomata and water vapor through the stomata, it is a fundamental reality that happens whether it's 2020 or 2021 or 2022. I mean, we can see that there's no year presented on this, so this is sort of like a reality that happens for any year, if you will.
But this 7.2 depicts that relationship as a seasonal matter. Is that right? This figure 7.2 depicts it that way, correct?
I still don't think I understand exactly what you're trying to ask, so I apologize, but maybe you could try to reframe the question there.
Do you see the caption on figure 7.2, effect of seasonal evapotranspiration on alfalfa yield for the San Joaquin Valley of California?
I do see that, yes.
As using that caption, seasonal means within one calendar year. Is that right?
That's correct. It's one growing period for alfalfa from where it comes out of winter dormancy and then goes back into fall dormancy.
Thank you. And this figure is based on a paper called Grimes et al. 1992. Is that right?
That's correct. It's represented parenthetically in the caption there.
Ms. Mon, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 163? I'm sorry. Mixed up my numbers there. Apologize for that. Can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 164? Sorry, Ms. Mullen. And Dr. Davids, this is the Grimes et al. 1992 paper. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And can we please go to page 3, Ms. Mullen? Dr. Davids, do you see figure 3 on this page?
I do see figure 3 up on the top right there, yes.
You rely on this figure to state the opinion that alfalfa crop yields vary linearly and directly with ET. Is that right?
I don't think I would characterize that as correct, no. If I could maybe help the figure.
Actually, Dr. Davids,
Sure, go for it.
we'll go to your testimony. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 160? And go to page 6, paragraph 7. In this paragraph, Dr. Davids, you cite the Grimes paper to support your emphasized opinion that the relationship between crop ET and alfalfa yield is direct and linear. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to exhibit KWBA 164? Dr. Davids, figure 3, do you rely on that figure to support the opinion I just quoted?
Well, the issue that I had with your question was that I do not base my opinion solely on this one figure. It's the entirety of this paper. that build this case for the linear relationship.
Do you see in figure 3 the information 1985 CUF 101?
I do, yes.
That refers to a specific variety of alfalfa grown in 1985. Is that right?
That's right. It's a specific cultivar for that particular year. That's correct.
And Ms. Mullen, I believe we're on page 3. I'm looking for table 3. This exhibit. I guess it's the next page. Dr. Davis, do you see table 3 on this page?
I do see table 3, yes.
This table indicates that the alfalfa in this study was grown only in 1985 and 1986. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you know whether the entire experimental area considered in this paper equaled about 1/2 of an acre?
I understand it to be, I don't recall as I sit here the precise amount of area. I do recall the experimental setup with the sprinklers and the application of sort of a distribution of different amounts of water from the center having the greatest to the edges having the least. But the specific area of land that was involved, I do not know.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to page 2? And there's a heading, I believe, materials and methods. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull back out of this? I need to make sure I'm on the right page. Thank you very much. Could we go forward or scroll backwards, please, Ms. Mullen? There we go. My apologies. Dr. Davids, do you see the second paragraph under the heading materials and methods?
I do.
Do you see that it states the boundary or the measurements of the experimental area?
I do see that. Yeah, 77 by 27.4 meters.
Do you know whether that equals about 1/2 an acre?
Let's see, 80 times 30 would be 24, let's see, 2,400. And that's meters, so times 10, about 25,000 square feet. So yeah, probably a little bit over 1/2 an acre.
Is it your opinion that this paper supports the idea that alfalfa yields vary directly and linearly to crop ET in all situations?
I would like to understand what you mean by all situations.
You have expressed the opinion that there is a direct and linear relationship between alfalfa yields and crop ET, correct?
That is correct.
Do you believe that relationship exists over all years?
I do believe that same fundamental principle, because of the linkage between carbon assimilation and transpiration, is a fundamental reality, whether it's 2020 or 1920 or any other year. That's correct.
And you believe this paper supports that theory, is that right?
I do, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thank you very much, Dr. Davis.
Hey.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Dr. David's testimony, KWBA 160, and go to the top of page 4? And Dr. Davids, on lines 4 through 8, you described that theory about the relationship between alfalfa yields and crop ET, correct?
Yeah, this is an excerpt from my case in chief analysis, and then I go on to add additional details in the subsequent paragraphs.
And on line 6, you cite 4 academic papers for that. Is that right?
Again, these were 4 papers that were cited from my case in chief analysis. That's correct.
And you cite them in your rebuttal testimony. Is that right?
I mean, they're present here as a reiteration of the statement that I made. That's correct.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1501? Dr. Davids, do you recognize as the Cowdehay et al. 2021 paper you've cited?
It's been a while since the case in chief preparation here, so it maybe Ms. Mullen, would you mind zooming out? And I do recall this paper, but I'd just like to see the entirety of it. Sustainability. Yes, that's correct.
This paper concerns cotton, correct?
It does, yes.
You did not use cotton as the basis for your analysis of the relationship between crop yields and crop ET, is that right?
No, because of the prevalence of alfalfa at circa 1914, which I estimated to be about 76% of the district, 38,500 acres. Alfalfa's change in yield was used as a base. I used alfalfa's changes in yields as a basis for the correction to crop coefficients.
And your period over which you corrected crop coefficients extended from 1990 back to 1885, is that right?
That is correct.
Was there some period during that when cotton was the dominant crop in Kern County?
If I recall correctly, cotton, I think, became king maybe circa 1970. Again, this is from memory. It's been a while since I've looked at this particular portion of my case in chief analysis. And at that portion, I guess if you think about the correction, if I can use my hand, if that's all right, for the correction, 1970 would be really close to the point where there's zero correction. So the very most minimal of corrections would have occurred during the portion where cotton was produced substantially within the current Buena Vista Water Storage District service area.
But that period was during your regression period, is that accurate?
So
Yeah.
I do want to interpose another objection on undue consumption of time. I mean, we're back here talking about Dr. David's case in chief testimony. His rebuttal testimony is a critique of Dan House's opinions about alfalfa yield as related to crop evapotranspiration. I really think we're wasting our time here.
I will say this. So, Mr. Becerra, I'm operating under the assumption that you're setting yourself up for something here. So,
I'm reviewing the papers Dr. Davids relied on to critique Dr. Howe's rebuttal.
which we've already discussed and were already raised in his case in chief.
We actually haven't discussed these papers. There was an awful lot more in the case in chief.
There were other things.
I'll move on from this one though.
Well, let me, and hold on for a second. I'll just ask, I mean, you certainly are entitled to cross-examination, and Dr. Davids is entitled to explain his responses. I just will ask both of you to work together, which I think you are attempting to do, to be specific and provide in the questioning and specific in the responses. so that we can be efficient. So I'll just add that, and back to you, Mr. Becerra.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1502? And can we please scroll down to the next page? Dr. Davids, do you see that this is the Briggs and Shantz 1913 paper you cited in your sir rebuttal testimony?
I do. That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 30? And Dr. Davids, do you see figure 2 on plate 9 here?
I do.
It shows alfalfa being grown in pots. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe Hanks and Retta refer to them as trash cans. They were garbage cans here. Yes.
Do you know whether all of the alfalfa grown for this study was grown in trash cans?
I don't know if that's the case for sure. It was a pretty clever study, but I don't know if every single cultivation was in trash cans or not.
Is it your opinion that this paper supports the theory that alfalfa crop yields vary directly and linearly with crop ET in all conditions?
I mean, this was one of the first studies. The reason I said it was clever is because I think it was one of the first studies that tried to understand the relationship between crop water consumption and biomass production. And I do believe that this was one of the foundational studies that really elucidated the linear and direct relationship between those two processes as they were sort of uncovering this relationship about carbon assimilation and the transpiration of water.
Is it fair to say that growing alfalfa in trash cans is quite a controlled environment?
I have not seen a large scale. I'm guessing Miller and Lux were not growing alfalfa in trash cans. Let's put it that way. So I think that's
Thank you.
probably fair to say.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1503? Dr. Davids, you see that this is the Lindenmeyer et al. 2011 paper you cited in your sir rebuttal testimony?
I do see that, yes.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 2 and look at figure 1? Dr. Davids, is this the figure in this paper you believe supports your opinion that alfalfa yields vary directly and linearly with crop ET?
I think this figure would be one of the evidence that support that.
This refers to alfalfa biomass, is that right?
It does in the caption say seasonal or season-long alfalfa biomass yield.
With alfalfa, is it possible for much of its biomass to be underground?
Yeah, I don't want to have this take any longer than it has to, but I think there's a lot in that question. I think what do we mean by much of it? Which varieties are we talking about? What growing stage? I think that's a pretty nuanced question.
Alfalfa has a significant root system, is that right?
Could you define what you mean by significant?
Sure. The roots can reach up to 9 meters underground. Is that accurate?
I don't, as I sit here today, I couldn't specify a direct depth to which the roots could reach for alfalfa. I do know that it is a perennial crop, and as such, it has time to develop, roots that penetrate more deeply than an annual crop would. Whether that's 9 meters, I can't say for sure, certain.
In the caption to figure 1, it refers to season-long alfalfa biomass yield. Do you understand that to mean within each year's growing season?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that basically similar to the other figure that we were looking at, that what this is talking about is the production of biomass across the course of 1 year as it comes out of dormancy and then returns back to dormancy. That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll down to the first full paragraph under figure 1? It starts with a regional average. Thank you. Dr. Davids, do you see about halfway down the paragraph, there's a sentence that reads, to normalize ET and biomass yield for different climatic and environmental conditions, a relative water production function with multi-year average data was created?
I do, I see that, yes.
That means that the authors of this paper developed a function to remove the influence of annual conditions from their analysis, correct?
Well, I think what this is getting at is not necessarily the change from year to year, but it's more getting at the change of different climatic conditions. So the slope of this relationship between crop water consumption and harvestable yield or biomass production does change with different climates, right? So this relationship is not always exactly the same slope. It does depend on climate, so I think the authors, what they're trying to say is that they're trying to correct for different climatic conditions and come up with something that can be used across different climate zones.
So they developed a function to remove the effect of different climate conditions from their analysis. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that second word, normalize, I think that's the idea, is to try to, take data from different climates to normalize it such that they're apples to apples and then be able to make a comparison between them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mon, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1504?
And I'm sorry, Mr. Becerra, Ms. Kinsey, before we do that, can we take a short break, please?
Absolutely, certainly.
Thank you.
It would be a good time for that. Thank you. Let's go ahead. It's 2:16. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 2:26. All right, it is 2:26. Let's go back on the record. I'll turn to you, Mr. Becerra. Do you have an estimate of how much additional cross-exam you have for Dr. Davids?
I'm almost positive we'll be done by your 3:30 break.
Almost,
That is-
okay, good. I'll take that.
That is my intent.
All right, we'll do our best with that. And I will continue to encourage both of you to be efficient. And I will hand things back to you, Mr. Becerra. You may go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1504? Dr. Davids, do you recognize this is the Grismer 2002 paper you cited in your Sir rebuttal testimony?
I do.
This paper concerns cotton yields in California and Arizona. Is that right?
That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 10, which is document page 236. Do you see figure 1, Dr. Davids?
I do see figure 1, yes.
It shows the relationship between crop ET and cotton yields. Is that right?
That's correct. So this specifically is for lint yield for cotton against estimated water use in ETC. That's correct.
And it's for upland cotton. Is that right?
Yeah, per the caption there, that's correct.
And that's one variety of cotton. Is that accurate?
I don't know if upland would be considered a variety, but it's for upland cotton. That's correct.
Figure 1 shows that there is no statistically significant relationship between upland cotton yields and crop ET in the Arizona counties. Is that right?
Well, I think I need to clarify an important point here. And that is that the nature of my Sir rebuttal testimony was speaking about forage crops like alfalfa, where harvestable yield is related to crop water consumption. Now we're talking about cotton, which is fundamentally a different crop, and only a portion of the above ground biomass is actually harvestable. That's the lint. There's the stalk and the stem are not harvestable. So I think the subject matter of my Sir rebuttal testimony really doesn't pertain to this this discussion on cotton.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Dr. David's testimony, KWBA 160, on page 4? Dr. Davids, do you see on lines 4 through 6, you cited the Grismer 2002 paper to support a universal relationship between crop yield and evapotranspiration?
Yeah, I see the sentence quoted there. That's correct. Yes.
Is it now your opinion that paper does not support that statement?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think what I'm trying to say is that the nature of the Sir rebuttal testimony was with regards to alfalfa and the remainder of the citations. I mean, these citations are in here simply as an artifact of me quoting my case in chief analysis, and then there's subsequent focused alfalfa references, within my Sir rebuttal testimony here.
Well, you just stated that Grismer 2002 doesn't apply to forage crops like alfalfa. Is that right?
Well, the Grismer paper that we were just looking at is a paper about cotton. So maybe you could rephrase, ask the question again, but I think if I understood your question, a paper about cotton does not apply, to a question about alfalfa.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 162? Sorry, I believe it's 162, sir. It's called 162 Sir rebuttal. My apologies. There we go. Dr. Davids, do you recognize exhibit KWBA 162 Sir rebuttal as the Perry 2009 paper you cite in your testimony?
I do, yes.
This is the paper you made a point of saying involved Dr. Burt from Cal Poly, is that right?
Yeah, he's the last author listed on this paper. That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 5? And can we please scroll down in the right-hand column until we see the citation to Tanner and Sinclair? There we go. Dr. Davids, the sentence, do you see the sentence before that citation? The essential constant or linear relationship between biomass and transpiration has been observed experimentally since the early 1900s and has wide agreement in the scientific literature. You see that statement?
I do, yes.
You quoted that in your testimony, is that right?
I did, yes.
Do you see the sentence following that citation?
I
I'll
do.
read it for the record.
Yep.
It is important to note from the above points that while the water productivity of a plant is essentially linear for a given situation, the slope of that relationship varies from location to location and season to season. You see that?
I do see that, yes.
You did not quote that in your testimony, correct?
I did not, no, didn't.
Do you understand the term season in that sentence to mean the annual growing season?
I don't actually.
You don't.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you understand season to mean an indefinite period of years?
No, actually, in this case, I understand season to mean the more proper, if you just looked up the definition of season, in terms of the winter, spring, summer, fall sense of season, actually, in this case.
So the relationship of crop ET to biomass would vary by each of the 4 seasons within a given year. Is that accurate?
Well, I think a helpful way to think about this is the start of the sentence, says that it varies from location to location. So, and I think we've already spoken about how climate can change the slope of this relationship. The slope is essentially called the water use efficiency of a crop. And so if we think about why would it change from location to location, it's the climate differences. But if we think about, like, for example, growing something in England would be quite different than growing something in California. Now, if you think about California, though, the winter of California is similar to the weather in England, right? So what this is saying is that in the wintertime, when the climate in California is more like England, alfalfa might have a water use efficiency similar to England. In the summertime, it's going to have a water use efficiency closer to Morocco or some other Mediterranean, but in aggregate, over the course of the growing season that integrates those different seasonal changes, this relationship is, as the previous sentence states, essentially constant or linear.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1505? Dr. Davids, do you recognize exhibit Buena Vista 1505 as one of the UC Davis papers from the book you have described?
I do, yes.
And I'm going to refer to it as Putnam after its lead author.
Sure,
Understand that?
yes.
Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll down? There's a map showing a map of California. There we go. Dr. Davids, do you see figure 1.1 on this page 2?
I do, yes.
Do you see that it breaks California up into different regions where alfalfa is grown?
I do, yeah, I see that there's 6 different regions identified.
Kern County encompasses portions of the San Joaquin Valley region and the high desert region. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Do you know whether the crop ET for alfalfa varies in those 2 regions?
The evaporative demands for these 2 different regions would likely be different. The extent to which I don't, as I sit here, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the differences would be. Precisely.
In developing your theory in which you develop crop ET demands within Buena Vista based on Kern County crop records, did you investigate from which portions of Kern County the relevant alfalfa was grown?
I feel like I'm not allowed to speak about the Kern County alfalfa yield data, so I'm hesitant to. Is that something?
Let's do this a different way, and I'll ease your mind on that.
Okay. I mean, I just want to be clear with Ms. Kinsey's exclusion of testimony. I don't want to speak about something I'm not supposed to.
And I appreciate that. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 133? This is from your case in chief testimony, correct?
That is correct.
This involves Kern County crop records, is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, Kern County Agricultural Commissioner reports. That's correct.
In preparing this exhibit for your case in chief, did you investigate where in Kern County any of this alfalfa was grown?
Objection. Asked and answered in the case in chief hearing, frankly, number one. 2, I do think the evidence relating to the relationship between alfalfa yields over time was excluded. And I think Dr. Davids is happy to talk about all of the alfalfa yield data that supports that relationship, but I don't know that you want to go there, Ms. Kinsey. And I think that if we're going to ask this line of questioning, you ought to be allowed to bring all of that in.
I'll move on, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 163? Dr. Davis, this is one of the UC Davis papers you cited, correct?
Yeah, that's right. This is chapter 7 of the 24 chapter book on irrigated alfalfa.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 3? And can we please scroll down to the text under the heading seasonal alfalfa evapotranspiration? Dr. Davids, do you see that this states that seasonal evapotranspiration in the Central Valley is about 48 to 49 inches per year?
Yeah, I do see that it says the average historical season ET for various regions in California is 48 to 49 inches. That's correct.
Do you see that it states that it's 76 inches in the southern desert areas?
I do see that, yes.
Is it possible for crop ET for alfalfa to vary significantly between different areas of Kern County?
Well, I believe the southern desert areas, and I have not read the Hansen et al. Paper. I guess that's from one of the authors of this particular paper. I think it's Blaine Hansen. I would want to know if that paper, when it refers to the southern desert area, I am assuming, without having the benefit of reading it, that that's speaking about the Imperial Valley or perhaps the Palo Verde region. And so that's not within Kern County. So I don't think that 76 inches, would be representative of portions of Kern County.
A portion of Kern County is in a high desert area. Is that accurate?
That's correct. If we went back to that map from chapter 1, there are 2 desert regions identified. There's the I forget what they call it, but there's the south. There's the southern desert that's like the Imperial Valley, and then there's the high desert region, if I recall correctly, that would be inclusive of portions of Kern County.
Thank you. Moving on from alfalfa yields, Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Dr. David's testimony, KWBA 160, and go to page 25? Dr. Davids, do you see paragraph 40?
I do, yes.
And to summarize, in paragraphs 40 through 43, you state how you disagree with Dr. House's corrections to your case in chief analysis. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And if we can please go to page 27, Ms. Mullen. On lines 3 through 5, Dr. Davids, you state that Dr. House presents that applied water would have been 248,000 acre feet circa 1914. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. In Dr. Howe's rebuttal testimony reference there, there's a so-called correction that states that the applied water would be 248,000 acre feet. That's correct.
And you understand Dr. House calculated that number by using 2017 to 2019 ITRC metric data for alfalfa?
No, that's not the case.
Okay. Do you understand he applied your 53% efficiency level?
I do understand that, yes, and I think it's 54% circa 1914.
My apologies. On lines 6 through 8, you reference bulletin 9. Is that right?
That's
Is it your understanding that's the state's 1920 report concerning what I'll call the Kern River area?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you see on line 7, you have the applied water duty of 3.0 acre feet per acre for alfalfa?
I do. I see that. Yes.
When you use the term applied water, do you mean the amount of water applied to the field?
I do. And the in the table, and I'm trying to remember the page on it. I think it's 197 or so. Yeah, there it is, 197. In Bulletin 9, the authors do a really good job of specifying, because oftentimes when people say water duties, they're talking different languages, and you don't know whether they're talking about the consumptive water use duty or the applied water use duty, or what water duty are we speaking about. I forget the exact language, but the table makes it very clear that the numbers that they're representing below do represent the amount of water applied to the land.
Is it your opinion that that number of 3.0 acre feet per acre accurately states alfalfa's water demand as of 1914? Applied water demand.
I think what's being stated here is that Bulletin 9, the authors of Bulletin 9, who had done extensive investigations into the cultivations of crops, and again, this is specifically in a section speaking about the lands south of Wasco Road, so it would have been the Button Willow service area, that they, as I state here, suggested an applied water duty of 3 acre feet per acre for alfalfa. So I think that's precisely what is being represented here. It's the intent of the authors of Bulletin 9.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 14? And I know we've got the Hathi Trust on the front, but Dr. Davis, you recognize this as Bulletin 9?
I do.
Can we please go to PDF page 197? And Dr. Davis, you see this page has the heading area now under second point water?
I do.
Now using second point water.
I do, yes.
Is this the page you were just referencing?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And so that table states the 3.0 delivery to land number, correct?
That's right.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 193, which is Bulletin 9, page 184? Do you see that this is the first page of chapter 9 in Bulletin 9?
I do see that, yes.
Do you understand that that table stating the 3.0 acre feet per acre is within this chapter?
Ms. Mullen, would you mind just to be 100% sure, would you mind just scrolling down, to make sure that there's no chapter headings prior to the, nothing on that one. Sorry, yeah, keep going for me, Ms. Mullen.
I think we went backwards.
Yeah, I meant from 193. I just need to see pages 194, 5, 6, and then 7, just to clearly answer Mr. Becerra's question here. Sorry for I don't intend to, just want to be precise about this here. Let's see, so if we get to page 194.
Ms. Mullen, I think we need to go backwards at this point to PDF 194.
I think there's some confusion whether we're talking about the actual page numbers or the PDF page numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it's definitely, let's see. Yeah, because I think, what is it? It's the 197 is the PDF page number, right? So we need to go, I think, from PDF page number 193 to so I think I was confused because I was looking at the document page numbers. Okay, so this is, would you mind just going back up to one page prior, Ms. Mullen, for me? Yep, and then go to the next page, please. And the next page. And the next page. And yes, I can confirm this is in chapter 9. Sorry for the use of time
No,
there.
I appreciate you being careful. Thank you. So Ms. Mullen, after all of that, can we please go back to PDF page 193? Thank you. You see in the paragraph immediately after the chapter title, there's a sentence that starts with a water supply regulated by storage.
I do. It looks like the third sentence of the first paragraph.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you see that sentence says present practices in the use of water can be modified?
I do see that. Yes.
Going further down the page, do you see the heading water requirements with regulated supply?
I do see that. Yes.
Do you see further down in that paragraph, it references the water duty of 3.0 acre feet per acre?
Yeah, I think the second paragraph under that heading, I see on the 5th line, the reference to 3.0 acre feet per acre.
Did you see the same reference to 3.0 later in the paragraph?
I do. I see it probably 5 lines from the last sentence or the last line in that paragraph.
Is it fair to say that the Bulletin 9 was presenting 3.0 acre feet per acre as a change from 1920 conditions?
Well, I think to precisely answer that question, I think it'd be nice to look at 197 again and the caption and the specific
Well,
context.
let's stay on this page. Do you see the statement, quote, an improvement in use for a full seasonal supply to 3.0 acre feet per acre is considered as large a change as can be expected? Do you see that statement?
I'm searching very hard for it, but where does that start?
That statement starts in the second paragraph under the heading water requirements,
Okay.
about 6 lines from the bottom of
Okay.
that paragraph.
And Ms. Mullen, can we zoom in, please, for my
Yeah.
sake?
Thank you. So I see there's a sentence that starts with while these. Are we talking
Yes.
about that sentence?
Yes,
Okay. And then did you start reading it in the middle of that sentence?
I did.
Okay.
An improvement.
While these. Okay, so and improvement. So that's what you're reading there.
Correct. And that statement indicates that use of 3.0 acre feet per acre would be a change from 1920 conditions, correct?
I don't think that's what this sentence is saying. I mean, this is a difficult sentence. I think we might all agree it's long and there's a lot in the preceding part that we haven't really worked through. Yeah, I don't know if you want to, if maybe you could restate the question, but yeah, I don't.
Is it your opinion that this portion of bulletin 9 is not stating the change would be necessary to get to 3.0 acre feet per acre?
Well, I'm reading, I just read the full sentence again to try to get the context here. And what it states is, you know, that an improvement in use for a full seasonal supply to 3 acre feet per acre is considered as large a change as can be expected. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I guess the sentence kind of speaks for itself. The 3 acre feet, you know, I think is talking about the full seasonal supply for alfalfa.
Okay, thank you. Referring to the preceding sentence that begins, the results of the canvass of pumping plants, do you see that?
I do, yes.
That refers to 4.9 feet being pumped north of the river for alfalfa, is that right?
I do see that, yes.
Do you understand that to mean 4.9 acre feet per acre were being pumped in areas north of the river for alfalfa?
I do understand that, yes.
And Buena Vista's, I'm sorry, let me go back. As of 1920, Miller and Lux's Button Willow Ranch was located north of the river. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And that's where current Buena Vista's Button Willow service area is located. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Can we please go back to Dr. David's testimony, exhibit KWBA 160? And on page 27, on line 6, you indicate that Dr. House's corrections to your testimony had an average water duty of 4.91 acre feet per acre for alfalfa, circa 1914. Is that right?
That's incorrect.
You don't state 4.91 acre feet per acre?
Well, I just want to be really precise with this. So you inserted the word for alfalfa. And so that's not correct in terms of, there were other crops cultivated circa 1914. So that number represents an average over the entire district. You can see the math parenthetically represents 50,472 acres. And not every single one of those acres was cultivated with alfalfa. So therefore, yeah, we can't say that's the duty for
I
alfalfa.
appreciate the clarification. So on line 6 and 7, on lines 5 and 6, you identified Dr. House as stating an overall water duty of 4.91 acre feet per acre within existing Buena Vista circa 1914. Is that right?
That's correct.
And on line 11, and 12, you state that that's incredible. Is that right?
Well, yeah, what I state is that it's 64% higher than Bulletin 9's estimates, even assuming 100% alfalfa cultivation.
And in this place, you're referring to 3.0 acre feet per acre as the quote Bulletin 9 estimate. Is that right?
That's correct.
And as we just discussed, Bulletin 9 stated that the state's canvas in 1920 identified average water applied for alfalfa north of the Kern River was 4.9 acre feet per acre. Is that right?
No, I think we have to be very precise here that statement was in relation to the application of groundwater to alfalfa. I mean, we don't know if that was 1 acre of groundwater, or, sorry, 1 acre of land that was supplied by groundwater, if it was 10 acres, if it was a trash can, maybe it was 1,000 acres. We're not sure exactly what it is.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to exhibit KWBA 14? And PDF page 197. And can we blow up towards the, I'm sorry, 193, Ms. Mullen, my mistake. Do you see the reference to 4.9 feet north of the river?
I do. Just again, the point here is that it says we're pumped for alfalfa southeast of Bakersfield and then 4.9 feet north of the river.
And the next sentence indicates that circa 1920, water use for alfalfa involving groundwater was more efficient than deliveries through ditches. Is that right?
Well, I guess working my way down from 4.9 again through this difficult sentence to the part I think that you're getting at in terms of the more efficient. I mean, it's hard to also skip past the fact that these cases include cases of excessive use in that 4.9 average.
Is it possible that where surface water was being used, more than 4.9 acre feet per acre was being applied to alfalfa as of 1920?
Is it possible? I think as a scientist, I think of things in distributions, and so saying something that is impossible is denying the reality of things coming in distribution. So I can't say that it's impossible that you know, but certainly in terms of the distribution, we might be way out on the fringes of that.
But at least for alfalfa irrigated with groundwater north of the Kern River, Bulletin 9 found that approximately 4.9 acre feet per acre was being used as of 1920. Is that right?
Well, again, this comes back to the discussion of what we mean by use. I think in the question you stated was being used. I think that was the applied water duty. I think if we can be precise with that language, we don't know how many acres this was representative of. We also know that this includes cases of excessive use, which is what's stated in the following sentence. But with those caveats, there was an average of 4.9 acre feet per acre north of the river applied to alfalfa only for those with groundwater. And again, we don't know how many acres that represents.
Thank you. That completes my cross-examination of Dr. Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra. I don't have any additional questions for Dr. Davids. I should first look to the room. Is there anyone else who has a cross-examination questions for Dr. Davids? So I will next look to you, Mr. Bivens. Do you have a redirect for Dr. Davids?
I may, and can we take 5 minutes for me to confirm
Yes.
whether I do or not?
Yes, that seems fair. Let's reconvene at 3:11. All right, we're back. Let me look to you, Mr. Bivens. Do you have redirect for Dr. Davids?
I do. It will be brief, and I will also preview that in the interest of getting through KWBA's witnesses today, we will forego Polly Boissevain's summary of testimony and just proceed by verifying her written testimony. So I wanted to make that clear. We'll move this along as quickly as we can.
All right, thank you. With that, then I will turn to you for redirect.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, would you please pull up exhibit KWBA 014, PDF page 195. Dr. Davids, is it your understanding that the authors of Bulletin 9 believed that 3.0 acre feet per acre was a reasonable applied water duty for alfalfa in 1920?
It is. And I think we might need to get down to page 197 just to be sure we're looking at the right table here. But yes, the answer to your question is yes. Ms. Mullen, would you mind moving down to the table that represents the, there we go. There we go. Yes.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Davids. Ms. Kenzie, I have no further redirect questions for Dr. Davids.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bivens. Based on that limited redirect, Mr. Becerra, do you have any recross for Dr. Davids?
No, I do not.
Thank you. Then with that, I will look to you, Dr. Davids. Thank you so much for joining us once again. It was good to see you. And I appreciate your testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
It looks like we probably have time to go ahead and for you to call your next witness, Mr. Bivens, Ms. Boissevain, and we can swear her in and she can verify her testimony and we'll get that piece done if that works for you. Does that sound good?
It does. I think it will probably take about 2 minutes to get her in front of the screen.
Okay.
We'll be ready to go, but I guarantee you we'll be done by 3:30.
Good. Well, why don't we can formally take 2 minutes and we'll just come back right at 3:20.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go back on the record. I see Ms. Boissevain. And with that, Mr. Bivens, are you prepared to call Ms. Boissevain as your next witness?
Yes, Kern Water Bank Authority calls Ms. Boissevain as its next witness.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Boissevain. It's nice to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Please raise your right hand. Ms. Boissevain, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bivens, you may proceed with your witness.
Ms. Boissevain, is exhibit KWBA 254 a true and correct copy of your written rebuttal testimony?
Yes, it is.
Are there
Get
any,
her full name for the record.
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Boi-
what was that?
Ms. Boissevain, will you please spell your full name for the court reporter?
Yes, my first name is Polly, and that spells Polly. The last name is Boissevain, and that is B as in boy, O-I, S as in Sam, S as in Sam, E, V as in Victor, A-I-N as in Nancy.
Thank you.
and I'm sorry, did we get that KWBA 254 was a true and correct copy?
It is.
Okay, very good. And Ms. Boissevain, do you have any corrections that you'd like to make to your written testimony?
Yes, I do. I have a correction in exhibit KWBA 257 for the 1998 year. The spreading below second point, where I deduct that out, should be 28,852, not the 34,078 that's shown. And then that changes my total diversions to 346,767. And then that also affects my written testimony as well as my presentation.
And for the record, Ms. Kenzie, we will submit copies of the exhibits with those corrections very shortly, and certainly over the break. Ms. Boissevain, that concludes my direct examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I will ask just to confirm, Mr. Becerra, will you have cross-examination for Ms. Boissevain?
I will, but 2 points on that. First, Mr. Jacobs will be going before me. Second, if I could request Ms. Boissevain to restate her corrections so I can catch them, that would be great.
Certainly.
Yes, please go ahead, Ms. Boissevain, if you would, please.
Okay, so on exhibit KWBA 257, in the year 1998, I show a deduction for spreading below second point of 34,078 acre feet. That number should be 28,852 acre feet. And then the total diversion changes from 341,541 acre feet to 346,767 acre feet.
Thank you. I think I caught them. Thank you.
And Mr. Bivens, did I understand correctly that a corrected testimony, you will be able to submit that within the next half hour?
Oh, yes, at the beginning of the break. So if Mr. Becerra wasn't able to, or anyone else wasn't able to get that down, it will be reflected in what we submit. And we just, I guess, hopefully your staff will be able to move it to the public site.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Bivens. I was just going to ask my team if you would please be on the alert for that while we take our break and move that over as soon as possible. I think we would all appreciate that. So it is 3:24. Is there anything else we should address before taking our break from 3:30 to 4? And then we will reconvene at 4 o'clock. And I will start with Mr. Jacobs' cross-examination of Ms. Boissevain. All right. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to our break. I will see you all at 4 p.m.
Thank you.
at the time I was diagnosed, the options weren't really great.
Trying to get it turned off, and instead I did that.
All right, thank you, everyone. I apologize for being a few minutes late. It sounds like my team just now was able to move over the corrections to Ms. Boissevain's testimony. I apologize for that. So we did receive them and we will move them over. Based on that, at this point, Mr. Jacobs, are you prepared to begin your cross-examination of Ms. Boissevain?
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Ms. Boissevain.
Good afternoon.
The supplemental water availability analysis, which is exhibit KWBA 208, applies the regression equation that you developed to predict when unappropriated water would have been historically available based on flows at first point. Is that correct?
Unimpaired flows at first point, yes.
And the regression equation was developed based on 4 years when the first point flows exceeded 1.6 million acre feet and more than 100,000 acre feet were discharged to the intertie, along with a 5th year, 1986, when neither of those conditions occurred. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct that I used the 5 points to develop my regression equation.
And the supplemental water availability analysis does not independently take into account any other factors, such as reservoir conditions, weather conditions, or accretions to the Kern River, correct?
No, I would say that some of those things would be embedded in the analysis, but I did not look at those separately.
Your rebuttal testimony explains why you omitted some intertie flow years from the regression equation. For instance, the intertie operated in 1982, but as described in paragraph 13 of your rebuttal, You excluded that year from your regression equation because the intertie only operated for 2 weeks, correct?
Yes, I excluded it based on the fact that there were 3 values, 97, 82, and 86, and I chose 86 of those, which was the more conservative value, also because there was a break in the data. Subsequently, I determined that in 1982, the intertie was operated for 2 weeks in December to draw down storage in anticipation of flows for 1983.
And in 1982, total unimpaired flows at first point were only 1.27 million acre feet, well below the 1.6 million acre feet where your equation predicts there will be water available to appropriate due to operation of the intertie, correct?
Yes, the unimpaired flow in 1982 was 1.27 million acre feet.
Isn't it fair to say that the intertie operated in 1982 due to factors other than just unimpaired flows at first point?
Yes, I would say that that's true.
Like capacity or lack thereof in Isabella?
Well, yes, the Corps needing to evacuate storage in preparation for 1983.
What about other factors such as intense precipitation or significant accretions?
I don't know whether those were a factor in what the Corps chose to do in 1982.
Similarly, you excluded 1997 from the equation because the intertie only operated for 1 week that year, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in 1997, the total unimpaired flows at first point were 1.18 million acre feet, again, significantly lower than the 1.6 million threshold at which your regression equation predicts unappropriated water due to intertie operations, correct?
Well, the 1.6, I would not say that's the threshold at which I'm saying the intertie is operated. But it's true that 1997 was below or was less, it was less flow in the less unimpaired first point flow. It was 1.18 million acre feet.
Well, your supplemental water availability analysis concludes that when 1.6 million acre feet is measured at first point, there will be 100,000 acre feet reaches the intertie, there is unappropriated water to correct?
No, I don't. I think that's a mischaracterization of what I said in my supplemental water availability analysis. That was an observation based on historical data. That in using the historical data set that I had, when there was 1.6 million acre feet, at least 100,000 acre feet had gone to the intertie. So that was basically an observation of the historical data, not a prediction of future flows.
And isn't it fair to say that the intertie operated in 1997 due to factors other than just total unimpaired flows at first point?
I don't have information on why it was operated.
Okay. But you did include 1986 in the regression equation, which was a year in which the intertie operated for 3 days total, correct?
I believe it was 5 days, actually, not 3.
Ms. Mullen, could you please pull up Bakersfield Exhibit 43? Great. I'm looking for page 24, please. PDF page 24. And can you clockwise rotate, please? Okay. Ms. Boissevain, do you recognize this exhibit?
I haven't reviewed it before, but it appears to be a page from the hydrographic report of 1986 indicating flow to the California Aqueduct intertie from the Kern River.
And I only see 3 days of flow in June. Is that your understanding?
That's what, yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, so your previous recollection that there were 5 days, it appears there were actually 3 days. And would you agree with me? There were 3 days in 1986 when the
Yes.
intertie operated? Okay.
So,
All right. And in 1986, the annual first point flow was 1.4 million acre feet, less than your representation of 1.6 million acre feet, where your equation predicts there will be water available to appropriate, correct?
again, I don't think that's properly characterizing my regression equation. Again, that was an observation of the historical data that there's when there was at least 1.6 million acre feet of unimpaired first point flow, there was at least 100,000 acre feet of flow to the intertie.
But you excluded 1986 because it only ran for 3 days, correct?
No, I did not. I included 1986 in my regression equation.
Excuse me, you included it when it only ran 3 days. Here's my question isn't it arbitrary to include, to exclude 1982 and 1997 because of short intertie operations, but then include 1986, which had an even shorter intertie operation of only 3 days?
I included 1986 because it was more conservative than 1997 or 1982. I subsequently evaluated including 1997 and 1982. And what I found is that you still have a valid linear relationship, but it does indeed show that there would be flow to the intertie at lower first point unimpaired flows up to about 370,000 acre feet. So from that, I think it shows that my analysis is more conservative.
In paragraph 14 of your rebuttal, you state, quote, excluding 1983, as shown for the 4-year trend line on KWBA 255, shows that the 4-point model provides a good prediction of unappropriated water for first point unimpaired flows up to about 1.7 million acre feet, but predicts substantially more unappropriated water to be available for higher first point unimpaired flows. Now, just so I'm clear, the quote, good prediction of unappropriated water refers to application of the regression equation you developed to historic first point unimpaired flows, correct?
Yes.
It's looking backwards in time and assuming operation of a hypothetical intertie, correct?
Well, the regression equation is based on actual data when the intertie operated. I regressed unappropriated water, which is not only water that went to the intertie, but also water diverted by the Kern Water Bank Authority during the mandatory release period in those years. And I developed the regression equation looking at the relationship between that and unimpaired first point flow.
Fair enough. It's a look back in time applying your regression equation.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, how can the State Water Board use this, quote, good prediction of unappropriated water to determine when water is available to appropriate going forward?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
Ms. Boissevain developed a water availability analysis. I'm asking how the State Water Board should use it to determine when water is available.
I think that's the problem. I mean, her testimony clearly says that she's not intending to provide a prediction for future looking analyses.
Well, I'm gonna overrule the objection with the caveat that Ms. Boissevain can respond within the limits of her expertise.
I prepared the water availability analysis to demonstrate that there's a reasonable likelihood of water available. I didn't try to predict how the State Board might use my water availability analysis to determine when water is available in the future.
When would you expect that process would take place? We're gonna do this all over again?
Objection, argumentative, and calls for speculation.
That's a serious question.
Well, Mr. Jacobs, let's rephrase the question and you can omit the part where you say, are we going to do this all over again, please?
Okay. How is the State Water Board going to determine the conditions under which water is available to appropriate based on your water availability analysis.
The same objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Again, I prepared the water availability analysis to determine to show that there's a reasonable likelihood that water would be available. I didn't prepare that with the anticipation of trying to determine how the state board would determine how to use my water availability analysis to determine whether there's water available in the future.
So you're not offering an opinion that the State Water Board should declare Kern River water is unappropriated when first point flows reach 1.6 million acre feet.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, I'm going to compare exhibit North Kern 148 to several other exhibits as I ask some questions. The other exhibits in order are Bakersfield 35, 37, 40, 43, and 55. And we'll start with North Kern 148, please.
I suspect Ms. Mullen is busily preparing all of the ones you listed off, so just give her a moment.
Sure. There it is. All right. Ms. Boisvin, I'd like to ask you some questions now about the operation of the intertie during the years that you used in the supplemental water availability analysis, and specifically the relationship between when the intertie operates and when 1.6 million acre feet are measured at first point. All right, let's start with this North Kern 148. The first row here shows the monthly intertie discharges for 1978, correct?
Yes, it appears to, yes.
Okay. And 1978 is one of the 5 years included in your regression equation to predict unappropriated water, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it shows here in April, May, and June of that year, there were discharges to the intertie that ranged between 35,500 acre feet up to almost 90,000 acre feet. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
But just for April, May, and June, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'd like to turn your attention now to Bakersfield Exhibit 35, page 9. I think this one has to get rotated too. And we can just stop there for a second. This is great. Thank you. Do you see at the top of the page, Ms. Boisvin, it says Kern River at first point of measurement, computed natural?
Yes, I do.
You understand that to be the natural flow at first point?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can Ms. Mullen, can you scroll down a bit, please? Yeah. Okay. Very bottom of this chart in the far right, you see a total acre foot number, 1,653,505. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And do you understand that to be the total flow as measured at first point in 1978?
No, I understand it to be the computed natural flow at first point in 1978.
Okay. And what's the difference between that and the flow at first point?
Well, the measured flow at first point would be influenced by the operation of Lake Isabella. As I understand it, the natural flow is a calculation that is made to deduct the operations of Lake Isabella and come up with a natural flow as if the reservoir were not in place.
Okay. But your regression equation uses this computed natural flow, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we're apples with apples. Mike, what I'm trying to get at here is, at what point in the water year is there 1.6 million acre feet computed having passed first point? And I'll submit to you that I've done the math, but we can certainly do it here again too. In 1978, there is not 1.6 million acre feet computed to pass first point until November.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct. Yet we only saw discharges to the intertie in April, May, and June of this year, correct?
That's correct.
So if we were trying to capture intertie flows under new applications to appropriate them, it wouldn't make sense to wait until 1.6 million acre feet had passed first point, correct?
Well, I don't think I've stated that. Again, we're talking about a threshold that I don't think I characterized my analysis as having that threshold.
That's fair. But can you answer that question, please?
Can you please restate the question?
Sure. If, as we see here on, first of all, North Kern exhibit, I believe it was 148, that there was intertie flow in 1978 in April, May, and June, but that the total flow in the river as computed at first point did not reach 1.6 million acre feet until November. It would not make sense. We would not be able to assign water to new water applications that flows in April, May, and June if we had to wait until 1.6 million acre feet had been measured in the system. Correct?
I would say that's correct, yes.
Okay. And you've said the 1.6 million acre foot number is not something that you have suggested would be used to predict when water is available to appropriate going forward, correct?
That's correct.
I'm asking this series of questions though to point out clearly that that fact. All right, Ms. Mullen, I'd like to turn back now to North Kern 148. Okay, and I'd like to take a look here at the row for the year of 1980. Again, a year that was included in your supplemental water availability analysis regression equation, correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and in 1980, we see that there was water discharged to the intertie in March, April, May, June, and July, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we turn back to Bakersfield 37, please? Yes, sorry, and page 9. It needs to be rotated. Okay, again, we see that this is the 1980 Kern River at first point of measurement computed natural. Do you understand that to be the computed natural flow at first point?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, could you scroll down a bit, please? And do you see in the bottom right corner there, the total acre feet is 1.639957 million?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And again, I did the math ahead of time, but we can do it here again if we'd like. Again, in this year, there was not 1.6 million acre feet computed natural flow at first point until November. The intertie ran through July, but 1.6 million acre feet did not enter the system or did not get measured at first point until November. Do you understand that to be correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We can do the same thing for 1983, 1986, and 1998. In fact, in 1986, there is no 1.6 million acre feet. And I think just for brevity, we won't do that. But in each of these years, Ms. Boissevain, do you understand that the flows to the intertie stopped before 1.6 million acre feet was measured at the first point?
Yes, I do. I think the point of my analysis was I was looking at it on an annual basis. And the annual basis indicated that in those water years, there was more flow to the intertie. And when I looked at it on an annual basis, there was a good relationship.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. I think with that, I will look to you, Mr. Becerra. At this time, do you have cross-examination questions for Ms. Boissevain?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Ms. Boissevain's rebuttal testimony exhibit KWBA 254 and go to page 11. And go down to paragraph 25, lines 22, 23. Ms. Boissevain, do you see on lines 22 and 23, you describe Dr. Miltenberger as stating there's no evidence Miller and Lux was recharging groundwater operations? I'm sorry, groundwater.
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with that opinion?
I leave that to Dr. Miltenberger to decide. I'm not a historian to evaluate groundwater use at that time.
So do you personally have no opinion about whether Miller and Lux was recharging groundwater as part of their operations?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, in this exhibit, can we please go to page 12 and paragraphs 27 and 28? Ms. Boissevain, in these paragraphs, do you state why you believe water discharging into the flood channel canal should not be treated as any sort of diversion by Buena Vista?
Yes, I do.
And do you see on lines, before making your statement on lines 14 and 15, did you investigate whether Buena Vista owns an easement to operate and maintain the flood channel canal?
No, I did not.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 1506? Ms. Boissevain, do you see that exhibit Buena Vista 1506 is a December 13th, 1929 indenture among the Kern Valley Water Company, Miller and Lux, and Buena Vista?
I see that that's what the first sentence says, yes.
Ms. Mullen, can you please scroll down until we get to the block indented paragraph? Do you see here that this indenture conveyed an easement to use, maintain, operate, and repair the Kern Valley Water Company canal to Buena Vista?
It would appear that's what it's describing.
Do you know whether this 1929 indenture is still in place?
I do not.
Do you know whether water that discharges over the concrete weir into the flood channel canal actually discharges into a facility operated by Buena Vista?
I do not.
So you did not determine whether Buena Vista controls the flood channel canal before excluding flows into it from Buena Vista's diversions in your calculations. Is that accurate?
Objection calls for a legal conclusion.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Ms. Boisvane can caveat her response.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Let me break it up. You excluded water flowing over the concrete weir into the flood channel canal from your calculations of Buena Vista's diversions, correct?
That's correct.
Before doing so, did you determine whether Buena Vista legally controls the flood channel canal downstream of the concrete weir?
No, I did not. I reviewed the hydrologic records, which in earlier years show those flows through the concrete weir being described as flood flows.
Can we, Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to Ms. Boissevain's testimony, exhibit KWBA 254? And go to page 10, paragraphs 22 through 24. To summarize, Ms. Boissevain, in paragraphs 22 through 24, you say that recharge through the Kern River channel downstream of Second Point should not be included as a diversion by Buena Vista. Is that right?
That's correct.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Dr. Miltenberger's exhibit KWBA 10? And Ms. Mullen, is it possible to size the first page so we can see the whole page? Could you, I ask you to shrink it just a little more, please, Ms. Mullen? Thank you. Ms. Boissevain, do you see that this document is an 1898 United States Department of the Interior report?
Yes, I do.
And Ms. Mullen, can we please scroll to the next page? Ms. Boissevain, do you see that this report is entitled Irrigation near Bakersfield, California?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 36? And we might need to blow this one up a little bit. Ms. Boissevain, do you see that this map shows various water bodies and facilities in Kern County as of 1898?
Yeah, it's a little hard to read. It's pretty small on my screen.
So hang on one second. I'm going to interpose an objection on this line of questioning around this document, Ms. Kenzie, on grounds of relevance and consumption of time. And I can elaborate, but
You don't need to. I'll turn to Mr. Becerra on relevance, please.
The relevance is the extent to which the Kern River channel has been modified to convey water under the Second Point right.
Mr. Bivens, would you like to respond?
yeah, Ms. Boissevain's rebuttal testimony is very clearly responding to Dr. Howe's corrections of her accounting from, I believe it was 1938 through roughly 2017. And the historical modification to the Kern River channel is described by Grunsky in 1898 in a document that Ms. Boissevain did not consider, nor did Dr. Howe's apparently, is not relevant to this proceeding.
Mr. Becerra, I'll give you a chance to respond, but I'm inclined to move off of this line of questioning for lack of relevance. I think I would like to keep us focused here on Dr. Howe's, well, Ms. Boissevain's response to Dr. Howe's critique. And it seems, I could be wrong, but I do think we had some discussion of this in past phases of, well, past portions of this phase. And I'm not sure we're going to get a lot more out of it here. But do you have anything else you'd like to
I
add,
will
Sarah?
move it along. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ms. Kinsey. Ms. Boissevain, have you examined Mr. Torres's exhibit, Kern Water Bank Authority 602?
No, I have not.
So
Well, I'm not sure. I don't recognize that exhibit name. I would have to see the exhibit to know if I've seen it.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Kern Water or KWBA 602 and go to PDF page 17? And can we please blow it up so we can see the label on the middle columns? Ms. Boissevain, do you see that in Mr. Torres's spreadsheet, it includes the river as a place of Buena Vista Water Storage District spreading?
Yes, and I think I remarked on these operational records where earlier records characterize the river reach between a second point and the downstream diversions. They're characterized in the record as river losses. Later on, they're characterized both as river losses and spreading.
Okay, thank you. But you do see that Mr. Torres's spreadsheet treats the river channel as a place of spreading no later than 1965. Is that right?
Yes, I see that.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 211? Ms. Boissevain, do you see that this is a 1983 agreement between Buena Vista and West Kern Water District?
Yes, I do see that.
You see it's entitled Agreement for Banking and Recovery of Water.
Yes, I see that.
Do you know whether this agreement has been in effect continuously since 1983?
I don't know that.
Ms. Mullen, can we please go down to PDF page 5 and section 5A? Ms. Boissevain, do you see that section 5A of this agreement states that Buena Vista will effect groundwater recharge in, among other places, the Kern River?
Yes, I see that.
Do you know whether Buena Vista effects that recharge under this agreement through the Kern River channel downstream of Second Point?
I don't know.
Let's go back to Ms. Boissevain's testimony, exhibit KWBA 254. And go to page 13, paragraph 30. Ms. Boissevain, I want to ask you some questions about Dr. House's corrections, and then that's all I'll have for you.
Okay.
Do you see in paragraph 30, you describe how you disagree with Dr. House's corrections in various ways, is that right?
That's correct.
And on lines 15 and 16, you describe how you excluded river channel losses downstream of Second Point and flows to the flood channel. Is that right?
That's correct.
And before you presented this testimony, you did not investigate whether Buena Vista controls the flood channel canal. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
In terms of Dr. House's corrections, do you agree with him that gains in Isabella's storage should be included as Buena Vista diversions?
Yes, I do.
And you didn't include those in some years in your case in chief testimony, correct?
That's correct.
Do you also now agree with Dr. House that losses from Isabella's storage should be included in Buena Vista's diversions?
Yes, I do.
And you did not include those losses in some of your case in chief analysis, correct?
That's correct.
Can we please pull up Ms. Boissevain's exhibit KWBA 257? Ms. Boissevain, does this exhibit detail your differences with Dr. House's corrections to your case in chief testimony?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Does exhibit KWBA 257 detail how you disagree with Dr. House's corrections to your case in chief analysis?
Yes, it does.
And are all of the years covered by this exhibit wet years?
Yes, they are.
Can we please go to PDF page 5? Ms. Boissevain, even with your corrections today, I'm sorry, let me go back. This page is about 1998, is that right?
That's correct.
Even with your corrections this year, are your differences with Dr. House less than 1% of the total volume of diversion?
Yes, I believe this is the one year in which our estimates were close. The rest were not.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go back to PDF page 1? This page concerns 1952, is that right?
That's correct.
The difference between Dr. House's corrections and your corrected total is roughly 40,000 acre feet. Is that accurate?
Oh, I think it's more than that. You mean, I'm sorry, could you restate the question, please?
And
Sure.
can we, Ms. Mullen, can we zoom in just a little bit, please?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
There on the bottom line, total diversions. Your difference with Dr. House is about 40,000 acre feet relative to his corrections. Is that correct?
When you compare his quote unquote corrections of my numbers with my numbers, that's correct.
And on the two preceding lines, add recharge in the river channel and add recharge in the flood channel canal, Dr. House calculates those as about 40,000 acre feet. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Your difference with Dr. House here is strictly recharge through the river channel and recharge through the flood channel canal. Is that correct?
I believe that's, well, yeah, I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please go to PDF page 2? And Ms. Boissevain, this page concerns 1969, is that right?
That's correct.
Your difference in total diversions with Dr. House is about 69,000 acre feet. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I'm sorry, I think I misstated it. Your total diversions, the difference between you and Dr. House's corrections is about 169,000 acre feet. Is that right?
That's correct.
And in your calculations, you did not include Dr. House's line items for spreading, river channel recharge, and flood channel canal recharge, correct?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. On this page in your calculations, you did not include Dr. House's line item for recharge in the river channel. Is that right?
That's correct.
You also did not include his line item for recharge in the flood channel canal. Is that right?
That's correct.
You also did not include his line item for spreading. Is that right?
That's correct.
When you total up those three line items, do they equal about 169,000 acre feet?
I see the river losses in this spreading. I don't, it's, let's see, I guess the recharge. Oh, I see, 26. Yeah, I think that's correct.
Those equal about 169,000 acre feet. Is that right?
It appears so, yes.
So those line items represent the difference between Dr. House's corrections and your corrected total. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Can we go to page 4, please, Ms. Mullen? Ms. Boissevain, this page concerns Buena Vista's diversions in 1983. Is that right?
Yes, it does.
And that's the wettest year on record to date. Is that right?
I don't think it's the wettest year on record. I believe there might have been an earlier, like 1916 was wetter, I believe. But
1983 was extremely wet, correct?
it was very wet, yes.
Going down to the bottom line, your difference with Dr. House's correction is about 78,000 acre feet. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it actually looks like about 65,000 acre feet. Oh, I'm sorry, compared to his corrections. Yes.
Okay. You did not include, Dr. House has, let me check my numbers here. So on the line, river channel losses / spreading downstream of second point, you deleted about 44,000 acre feet in your corrected analysis. Is that right?
That's correct.
And moving down, you did not include Dr. House's approximately 21,000 acre feet for flood channel recharge. Is that right?
Correct.
When you total those two numbers, they come out to about 64,000 acre feet. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And so that difference between you and Dr. House is 64,000 acre feet of the total 78,000 acre feet of difference. Is that accurate?
That seems correct, yes.
If we can go, please go back to your testimony, exhibit KWBA 254. And go to page 14, paragraph 32. In paragraph 32, you discuss the differences between your calculations and Dr. House's calculations for 2017. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you say they're very close. Is that right?
Yes.
Dr. House pointed out you had not included gain in Isabella storage in 2017 in your analysis. Is that accurate?
Well, I used the supplemental statements of diversion and use, which appeared to have the gain in Lake Isabella storage embedded in them.
You didn't have a separate line item for Isabella gain. Is that right?
No, because I couldn't tell from the supplemental statements of diversion and use where Lake Isabella storage would have been accounted for.
Okay. Ms. Mon, can we please scroll up to paragraph 30? And yes, thank you. Yeah, Ms. Boyce-Vane on lines 13 through 16. You state you did not include river channel recharge downstream of Second Point in your calculations. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you also did not include any water that went into the flood channel canal for 2017, correct?
Well, this was just in general. I didn't reanalyze 2017, but in the other years, these were the changes that I made. I did not include those in my corrected calculations.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up Dr. House's exhibit Buena Vista 503C? And while that's happening, Ms. Kinsey, I am trying very hard to finish this by 5.
I can tell. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Ms. Mullen, can we please go to page 14? And can we please see all of that figure there? Thank you. Ms. Boyce-Vane, I'm going to ask you a few questions just to orient us on locations. Do you see the diversion weir, or do you know where the diversion weir would be located here, just downstream of Second Point?
Yeah, I don't think it shows it there, but where the green pentagon is showing Second Point, I believe the diversion weir is immediately downstream of that.
Thank you. And do you see the outlet weir?
Yes, I do.
And water that flows over the diversion weir continues in the river channel toward the outlet weir, is that right?
Yes.
And water that flows over the outlet weir goes into the outlet canal?
Yes.
And Buena Vista owns and operates the outlet canal, in your understanding, is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Water that flows in the outlet canal can then flow north toward the flood channel canal, is that correct?
Yes.
And then it would flow into the flood channel canal at some point, correct?
Yes, my understanding is that it flows into the flood channel canal when it goes over the concrete weir.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we go to exhibit KWBA 239 and go to page 2? Yeah. Okay. Ms. Boyce-Vane, on this table in 2017, you show about 75,000 acre feet at the diversion weir, is that right?
That's correct.
That's water that went over the diversion weir, correct?
I would presume that to be the case, yes.
And then you show 58,000 acre feet at the outlet weir, is that right?
Yes.
So there was about 19,000 acre feet of water left the river channel between the diversion weir and the outlet weir, is that right?
That's correct.
And that's the area where Buena Vista provides water to West Kern as part of their exchange, correct?
Yeah, I don't have direct knowledge of that other than the agreement that you showed me earlier.
You didn't include that 19,000 acre feet in your calculations for 2017, is that accurate?
No, in 2017, I relied on the supplemental statements of diversion and use the total.
Did you know whether Dr. Howes did include that recharge in his 2017 calculations?
I'd have to look at his calculations again, but I believe he just used the total flow at second point, and there was no water to the inner tie, and there was no, I guess, I don't know whether there was recharge in the flood control channel. So I think he would have used that as representing the second point use, the total flow at second point.
And you just referred to recharge in the flood channel canal. Did you mean the river channel?
No, in the flood channel canal. I mean, he doesn't directly calculate flood, or he doesn't directly report on river losses or river recharge. He just reports on water that reaches second point, and then he deducts the water that goes in the flood channel other than recharge and water that goes to the inner tie.
And in your table here, the 58,000 acre feet at the outlet weir, that would be water flowing over that weir into the outlet canal. Is that right?
That would be my understanding, yes.
And the outlet canal is a Buena Vista facility, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Do you know whether water percolated out of that Buena Vista facility in 2017?
I don't know.
Do you know whether any of that water that flowed over the outlet weir in 2017 flowed into the flood channel canal?
I don't know.
Do you know whether any of the water that did flow over the excuse me. Do you know whether any of the water that did flow over the concrete weir into the flood channel canal percolated from the flood channel canal?
I don't know whether water flowed over the concrete weir in 2017 or not.
In any case, you would not have counted percolation from the flood channel canal as a diversion by Buena Vista. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mr. Becerra, if you have more than one more question, I'm gonna put you on a pause, and you're welcome to have more than one question.
I think I may have one or two.
Well, I'm going to hold us to, I did say a hard stop and I meant a hard stop, and I think Ms. Boissevain is going to have to join us in the morning anyway.
I think I can finish this.
You can finish. Okay, good. You have
So
90 seconds.
you have a variety of differences in calculating Buena Vista's diversions in 2017 with Dr. Howes, correct?
Well, in 2017, the information I had available to me was at the time I did the original analysis was the supplemental statements of diversion and use. I didn't have any other operational data, so I simply used what was reported on the supplemental statements of diversion and use.
And notwithstanding those differences, your respective calculations between you and Dr. Howes are, as you say, very close for 2017, correct?
Yes, although he does point out that I double counted some water. The diversion weir, the reported flows at the diversion weir and the outlet weir would represent some of the same water.
That's all I have from Ms. Boissevain.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra, right under the wire. Good work. So I do want to close in the next minute. So I will just say that, thank you, Ms. Boissevain, but I think we will need to see you again in the morning.
Okay.
I will. Mr. Bivens, do you have something to add very quickly?
Well, I would forego redirect if we can keep Ms. Boissevain from having to come back tomorrow morning.
Does anyone else have cross-examination questions for Ms. Boissevain? All right, then it looks like we can do that. So thank you, Ms. Boissevain. I will thank you for joining us again today, and thank you so much for your testimony. You are excused and you won't need to join us in the morning. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will defer to the morning. All other procedural issues we may need to get to, we will address the submission of KWBA's rebuttal exhibits. And I can also take a look at the appropriate exclusions associated with those based on my procedural ruling. So we'll pick up with all of that in the morning. And unless there's a last word from anyone, I will wish you a good evening and see you in the morning.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey.
Kenzie.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Bye.